Good morning. My name is Nelly Solaris. I'm a student ambassador from the George Mason chapter of ACDA, and I will be presiding for our presenters during this session. Any questions or comments can be sent to the chat or to our email, voicesunited@vaacda.org, which can also be found in the description of the video. All the questions will be relayed to our presenters at the end of the session. Our presenters today are Dr. Lisa Billingham, who is currently the professor of choral music education at George Mason University, where she conducts the university chorale and teaches other music education courses. She's a certified Laban movement analyst and has done research on how to incorporate the Laban movement theory in conducting pedagogy and the choral rehearsal. Dr. Billingham was the past president of Virginia ACDA and is currently the advisor to the George Mason student chapter, as well as a planning committee member and the campus liaison for the annual Voices United conference. Her co-presenter, Dr. Michael Wu, is currently the artistic director for Strathmore Children's Chorus, as well as a full-time faculty member for Landon School in Bethesda and the director of music for Faith United Methodist Church in Rockville. He was the past conductor of the Bel Canto Chorus for Children's Chorus of Washington. Dr. Wu is a published composer and arranger and an organist, and is a certified artist teacher through the Choral Music Experience. He has completed courses in OAKE Kodali Music Education and currently serves as the president for the Maryland, D.C. chapter of ACDA. Without further ado, I will pass the baton to our fabulous presenters who will be presenting on how to continue to inspire as a choral conductor and educator in the current world of remote learning.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to Voices United. In fact, Lisa and I met at Voices United. This conference is now in its 21st year, or 22nd year, or something like that. And Lisa has also mentored me through the DMA process at Mason, so I have a lot of debts to pay to her. And we also have a little good morning from our executive director, Tim Sharp. So without further ado, here he is.
Good morning, everyone.
ACDA, even
Thank you very much. Hey, ACDA members, welcome to our virtual conference this year for Voices United. So glad that you're keeping music alive during this COVID-19 pandemic time and finding new opportunities and new ways of doing things. So welcome, and let's learn together.
Well, good morning. I know that I'm not the only one who in this pandemic, even now that we are several months in, is thinking, what the blazes? What do we do? How do we teach choir when we keep being shown in the news and we keep being shown in report after report that singing is the super spreading event that defines how dangerous it is to be together? So this cuts to the core of what we do, doesn't it, Lisa?
It does. And one of the things that we've had the opportunity to do over the last month or so is to contact some of our colleagues from around the country. And they've shared their stories of how they are learning to, as we hashtag say, sing through the storm, how we consider what we do for community, and how important it is to support one another. So we have put together for you some short clips, and Michael will talk to you at the end today about how you can see the full of interviews that we've done. And Michael's going to share a screen, and let's get to it. So these are all the folks that are a part of our presentation today. Over to you, Michael.
Well, thank you very much. And we want to know that we want you all to know that we often can feel isolated because we're the only ones that do what we do in the building that we work, or we are the only ones that are leading the choir, and we put a lot of stuff on us. And I hope one of the ways that you know that we can keep singing is the fact that this moment has brought us together in a way that we never thought we could do before, like attending conferences with your pajamas on because you don't have to leave your house, or you can present and have a nice shirt on and maybe shorts underneath, but maybe I digress and give you too much information. But all of these people gave us more than 7 hours of conversation and dialogue, and there's no way that a 1-hour session like this can do them justice. They all have different parts of our choral field represented, so we thought that by having all of their more robust conversations and 17 15-minute segments on our ACDA Voices United page, that would help us to give you more information, and you can see who it is that you want to see and more detail about what it is they're doing to keep singing through the storm. But the first and foremost thing is that I can't be alone. I know that Lisa is not alone. We are all together, and that's why there's so many of us, and there's so many of us on so many of these webinars, whether they're from NATS, NAFME, Chorus America, ACDA. We're all trying to figure out what to do next, and the first thing that we all have to remember is that grieving is normal in the process. So here are some of our colleagues talk about grief and how they shift from grief to rolling up their sleeves, being creative, and finding new ways in this new medium.
Absolutely. Before these videos or these webinars, I certainly was having.
She looks frozen.
She is.
Give me a second.
Let's try Thea again.
Absolutely. Before these videos or these webinars, I certainly was having that depression, frankly. I think we all were, as meaning, our career has just been pulled out from underneath our feet, but more importantly, our love of singing has been changed dramatically. When I then just kind of came out and realized, all right, this is not forever. We will sing together one day. So let's look at it as change, which is scary and no fun. And I'll be honest with you, I was like, you know what? I've been doing this career for a few decades quite well, start getting by. And now I've been asked at this time, I'm required to learn an all new way to create my music, to do my work. I'm definitely grieving the actual physical conducting aspect of the work, since it's all just kind of here, or I've been writing rehearsals sitting from my piano, and that's fine too, but it's not that true conducting experience.
The webinar as it's come to be known, right, in our field, that was not a whole lot of new information, I think, to a lot of us, but having it all there in 1 hour really was crushing. It was crushing information. And I was texting colleagues across the country, and we were all sharing tears at the same time. So like I said, it wasn't new, but to hear it, it was hard.
It's shaking off the grief that we feel, and that grief is real. And I do want to speak to that for a second. That grief is real, and we do have to deal with that, and we have to own that and be transparent and honest with that. But as we're addressing that, I encourage and challenge everyone to deal with the grief by fighting back and finding ways to make music and to engage musically. Even though it looks different, it feels different, it doesn't give us the same sensations that we want, it can still be beautiful.
But I loved that Tim Sharp, before he signed off on that webinar, was, so now we need to think about what can we do. I think he recognized through the process that it was real heavy information for us and hard information. So yeah, there was definitely a grieving process, and I've seen my singers go through the grieving process.
It's just making it work and continuing to sing, right? I mean, I love that the theme is how do we keep from singing? And the answer is we don't. We must keep singing. I was looking at the lyrics actually before talking with you, and the first line, "My heart goes on, an endless song." I think for us, particularly with GMCW, being mission-based as we are as a social justice organization, particularly now with the protests in response to George Floyd's murder, we are so desperate to be singing and using our music to deliver the message of equality and justice. So like all choruses around the world, we are frantically pulling together rehearsals as best we can on platforms such as this. It is not ideal, but I've been really impressed. The singers are rolling up their sleeves. They recognize this is what we have, and they're willing to do it.
But in a situation like this, I will be darned if I'm going to let a pandemic stop me from making music with people.
So Lisa, as we go from all of that grief to all of that need to just make it work and not let a pandemic stop us, what were some of the things that we found out as we were moving from that grief to the action that we need today?
Well, one of the things we've found is that we now are finding new ways to practice virtually with music, but also to get together as small groups and as representative choirs for social justice. And it's important for us to remember that the most important thing as conductors as we work through this conference today and tomorrow is to remember that we have each other. And so we have lots of things that we can do to stay positive. And I think it's really important, Tim Sharp will talk about that later, how important it is that when you get stuck that you reach out and try not to put yourself on that single island. So Michael, if you want to continue on with how can we keep from singing?
Absolutely. And, you know, when we say that we want each of us to be connected, and you'll see at the end of these slides, and yes, this is being broadcast live, but will also be recorded and will also be on the ACDA Voices United YouTube channel for a time to come. And you'll see at the end of these slides, email contact information for both Lisa and me. We want to make sure that you can reach out, and all of the people that we've talked to who are just luminaries in our field in their own right, all of their emails that we use to contact them were also just World Wide Web available. So I think just reaching out in new and different ways and just reaching out is the most important thing. And you'll hear a few people talk about how they reach out to their choirs too, and why that's so important for us in this pandemic and for us as chorus directors. Oh, I did the wrong thing. Give me a second.
We knew that Zoom wasn't going to work for singing together, but it was a great platform and still is for us to meet on a regular basis. And so starting in about mid-March and all the way through the end of our normal choir year, which is through the first week or so of June, we've had weekly meetings at our regular rehearsal time. We knew that was a time everybody was available. And rather than rehearse, or rather than meet for the full 2 hours of our normal rehearsal, we would simply have a Zoom meeting for about an hour. We kind of settled into an hour rhythm because that seemed to work really well. And it's pretty simple. We, everybody logs in at 7 o'clock. I do a little greeting. We just talk a little bit about what's going on in general in the world, in our lives, in our church. And then I might mix up the order. But generally, one of the things we found that's really valuable, because we've got a fairly large group, we have just under 80 members in the choir, although, I never see them all in the same room when we're meeting in person, let alone on the Zoom meeting. But we had a large enough number that it was difficult to have an overall general conversation. And so we break into breakout rooms via Zoom. And at first I had those moderated by make sure one of our section leaders was in each room. We typically break into 4 rooms. And sometimes it's just open discussion. Sometimes I would give a devotional first and we discuss that question. But what we really modulated to was using that time in the breakout rooms to pray for one another.
So I run a community choir, and kind of our mission is embedded in the title itself. We are community, that's one of our priorities, and then choir is obviously our other priority. And so our leadership team has striven ever since we had to cancel everything in, late March, early April, striven to find creative ways to keep the community going and keep the choir going.
As part of our weekly gatherings, we were talking about in reaction to, Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and then Rayshard Brooks and others, as we know, Black people who have been murdered at the hands of officers and other people of authority. My singers really took that to heart because they are from many different backgrounds. We are very diverse racially and socioeconomically. So many of the singers see themselves in the communities that are affected most by these issues that are plaguing us right now. And so in our conversations, we talked about what can we do. Many of them went out and did things on their own. It wasn't safe for us to all go out the first few days to protest, but many of them did do it individually and would come back and share, and we would talk about it. So we kept discussing what can we do together, and finally it was decided we wanted to help address food insecurity, and we found the food shelf. And for 4 Saturdays in the month of June, we went to that food shelf each weekend and helped set up, help bring out the food. We would interact with the clients who would drive up and fill their orders. So over that time, probably 400 or so families, we were able to help, process the food and get it to them to take care of those families for a while. They did such a great job that the food shelf has called now to say, are you guys going to come back in August maybe? It was just a really beautiful community that we were able to become a part of. And the reason we chose this location was just 1 block away was the George Floyd Memorial. And so each week we would walk down and visit the memorial site and would take a moment to just ponder, reflect, and talk about how that felt to us, what that looked like to us, what it meant.
So Lisa, as we go from building community and finding ways to reach out and be more a part of our communities and relevant to our communities, that's something that has been articles in our choral journal and questions at many of our conferences, how we stay relevant to the community around us so that we can continue to thrive and grow. We also want to make that point in our music and in our music making and make music in this moment, right?
Absolutely. And there are so many resources that are coming out from ACDA and NCCO and NAFME, so that if you're looking for literature, there are other sessions actually that are happening during Voices United in the next 2 days, and you'll be able to see those recordings as well. Take an opportunity to look at the diversity that we can represent so that we can also be teaching in the moment that community means being inclusive.
Absolutely. And so as we think about that inclusive moment and we think about how we actually be choir and continue to sing, despite the fact that for most of us in most parts of the country and most parts of the regions impacted by our conference in Maryland, DC, Delaware, and Virginia, and then the neighboring states as well. There's a lot of our region that just can't get together because it's just not safe at the moment. So let's see what our colleagues in the field are saying about what to do to stay singing and stay together.
Thank you.
We knew that Zoom wasn't going to.
Well, this is proof of live, right? Because I can't figure out how to press play. I still can't figure out how to press play.
We knew that Zoom wasn't going to work.
We did this one,
singing
right?
Together, but
Yes, we did. Hang in there, everyone.
I'm having a moment. Isn't that interesting?
That's
No.
all right.
Okay.
It's all good.
Okay.
So for those of you that are looking at that slide up in the top right-hand corner, that remember that's a Voices United moment with Janet Galvan and Tim Sharp and Jim Papoulis. Boy, didn't we have a party that night.
Well, we're seeing people around the world turn to the arts right now as a sense of comfort. We're pre-recording this webinar, but we're on the Wednesday after the 4th of July. I think most every household in the country, if not around the world, watched Hamilton this weekend, right? People are turning to the arts for comfort. That was a global event around a musical. And we were so focused on, isn't Hamilton so cool, that I don't know that we focused on, isn't it so cool that everybody came together around music? And that's what happened. It happened. And so those are the things that we get excited about. We hitch on to those things that we know are going to excite people, that we know are going to motivate people during this time of uncertainty and help them through. We're all in this together, right?
being that right now during the pandemic, we're not able to come together to sing is so frustrating on many levels, obviously for all of us, but particularly during these protest times. Normally GMCW would be gathered down at the Supreme Court or downtown by the White House for sure, and raising our voice and leading the community in song, whether it's a civil rights song from years ago or just sharing our music, because in our programming, the music we sing, we do strive to have music that has a message of equality in it, just naturally with its lyrics, although at the same time, being a large group of out and proud LGBTQ and allied citizens together as the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington, pretty much whatever we're singing is going to be making a statement for equality as far as that goes. I'll tell you, not only the protests, but just last week, Supreme Court had that landmark, wonderful decision about equality in the workplace for LGBTQ citizens. And we would have been down there that morning, probably the night before, camped out, ready to go. So when it came out, it was like, yay! And it texted, and then I want to sing.
So our job is, as choral educators, we're about building community. We are about getting them through those hard places. And yes, the main thing we use is that unified breath and that sound that fills a space that we're all in. But we can be creative, as the choral community has shown, and find ways of still creating the community, still being that safe place, and finding ways to make music, to sing together, to share together. So we're still that safe place, and that social emotional connection is very much there. It's very important to our students. It's very important to adults. That's what drives the choral community internationally. And the stats on how many people actually sing is staggering. We are by far the most active hobby, and we're blessed to be able to do it professionally.
It's just so important to share your story and to raise your voice, as we know, and particularly being in quarantine. And I'm fortunate to be in quarantine with my husband and my puppy. Folks who are, live alone, I can't imagine. And I'm actually an introvert, so I don't mind. This is not a huge stretch for me. But it's just so important to reach out just to friends anyway, but to feel that connection. As we know, singing it becomes that common denominator, because we could be so very different. We have scientists in our organization, we have lawyers, teachers, moms, dads, the whole thing, the whole gamut of community. But we all have that in common. And particularly with GMSW, we all have, and hopefully everyone has, that common goal of equality for all people, and that we're all treated the same way. And so to be able to come together with our music to make that statement is wonderful. That said, we have been spending a lot of time here with social activities, tenor ones, get together Thursday night and just chat or whatever, what have you, and game night here online. And so it's just important to keep that going. But preaching to the choir here, I know, but can you imagine never singing again?
Right?
No.
Right? So I would say that as we figure out how we continue to reinvent what we do and how we do it, so that we take from this moment the fact that we should have made a digital progress in our field a time ago, but now's as good a time as any. It's about being there and singing in the moment. And we know that we sing, and as choir directors, we're all about listening. We're all about making sure that people's voices are heard in balance with each other, in tune with each other. And there's no better metaphor for that to apply to the engaged citizenship we advocate than to make that apply to how we reach across cultural and diversity lines and social justice lines, so that our choirs represent the communities that we work and live in even more, with our repertoire, with our membership, and just with the purposefulness by which we approach singing in more than Western art history kinds of ways. Lisa?
Sorry, we're going to continue to share how we can keep singing. I want to encourage everyone to be looking at the full interviews that we've done. We've tried to cull some of the most important things to remember, and that we can still do things like call and response with our choir. So we could be singing and then your choir can respond mute, or they can unmute. So Michael, if you'll bring on the next thing so that we make sure we have time for a little Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Absolutely. So right here, we're talking about what choir is, what we're trying to reinvent, and then most importantly, how we advocate. We know that PPP has been something that has carried a lot of our institutions and schools for a while because of this pandemic and its impact on our economy. We know that particularly if you work in a school setting, that there will be impacts to your budgets because real estate taxes will go, revenue will come down, and funding for education is often tied to those real estate taxes. So there are some markers for what we need to do to move forward. But let's listen to more of the experts than me stumbling and mumbling and bumbling.
I think in our minds as conductors, we yearn for what we miss so much, what drew us to singing together, which was in the same room with someone, feeling the breath, seeing the faces, responding to that energy. Right? And the rehearsal process leading to the performances. And all of that wrapped up together is what we've taken as choir.
Things that we have to reinvent is how we introduce the music, for sure. Reinvent how we communicate with our students. Just like every household is probably reinventing the whole whether or not we use technology idea, because I laugh with my singers. We've always said, get off the phone, get off the media, talk base. Well, now all that stuff we've been fighting against, we have to use. It's interesting, that makes me think of a side there, that when my seniors were here last week, they said, you adults think we actually know how to do all this stuff, but we don't. We don't know how to, I asked about Instagram and they were like, yeah, I really don't know. I mean, we use it, but I'm not sure how that happens. And, different things that I was looking for the youth to train me on. So it's about looking for new ways to engage them digitally in a safe environment. It has to be protected, especially with youth. It has to be creative. It has to be short, I think, because if it's online, they don't want to be online any more than they have to be, and yet they want to connect. So finding that balance, and it may be a different balance week to week of they're in rehearsal for 40 minutes, and part of that is talking and socializing, or the game's structured. And maybe the next week they're working so hard and you can read their faces just like you can in a rehearsal room, where they are so engaged and they're working hard. Maybe you can make it go up to an hour. I don't foresee a lot of 1.5 hour, 2 hour rehearsals that we're used to. So the less time, new ways to engage, staying positive. We have to put the smiles on our faces and help them. And even when we get off Zoom and whatever platform we're using, we may still shed some tears. And I do. It's hard to see them go through it. It's hard to feel it, but trying to be that strength for them and coming up with the elemental steps that will help your singers be successful, because we can't assume they know what to do. We can't assume they're going to figure out the process. We have to break it down piece by piece, step by step, to lead them to success. And I'm pretty good at doing that live in a classroom, but this whole digital thing is really hard.
So in putting together these concerts, and I'm just kind of talking to all of us here as we look at our next season, I know personally as a goal, for example, the holiday show, 1 hour. And that's the thing, is we spend so much time sitting here looking at our screens, or even if we're able to watch YouTube on the television and watch a concert, we're starting to have that very short attention span. And so I would suggest, again, our plan is to do, as I just described, you don't want to put an hour together of all virtual choir, just little boxes of singers. Just as you wouldn't program a live concert of all the same tempos or the same keys or same style. So you want to mix it up with the same idea. Now we're just mixing up a little different. So looking back for us at archival video, we want to find pieces that have an impact as far as the message. Also that it was a nice performance, the lighting was good, the sound was good, all those things, of course, you want to show well. And as I said, just mixing it up so that the audience, even though they're sitting at home on their couch potentially, still have an experience and have an arc in that show. Perhaps easier said than done. We're all figuring this out as we go. I heard a great expression the other day that is, we are living in this new house while we're building it.
And so, yes, we absolutely are focused on advocacy efforts to save programs and budgets. Knock on wood, it is seemingly that the funding and the cuts aren't going to be as big of an issue this year. For fall 2020, we're going to be okay. What I do foresee is a much bigger task at hand for saving programs for fall 2021. We're going to have, right now we've had a quarter of lost tax revenue. Come fall 2021, we will have 18 months of lost tax revenue. And that's really where it's going to start to hurt, and very deep cuts are going to have to be made. Right now, it's seeming that projected growth and investment in the arts and in education, it's going to be status quo funding. There's not going to be anything added, but we're not going to cut. But next year is when we're focused on that. So I'm working with those colleagues. Quanice Floyd is the executive director at AIMS. I work with her closely, and we are working with all those other arts serving organizations as well. We'll have a virtual presence in Annapolis to advocate. The National Association for Music Education, of course, does great work on Capitol Hill on a daily basis with their staff of lobbyists lobbying on behalf of music education at the federal level. And there are things that you can do as active participants in the field. For instance, NAFME has the National Association for Music Education has a grassroots action center where you can simply click in and send a letter, a pre-written letter to all of your elected officials in Washington, D.C. saying, we need funding for education by X date before cuts are starting to make because the budgets haven't been backfilled on the state level. Or the Arts Education is Essential document that the National Association for Music Education led that effort, a joint statement of hundreds of arts education serving organizations across the country. So there are many efforts that we're doing. If it's something that I'm directly involved in or a project that's happening within our affiliate structure that I'm making sure our members know about, we are actively engaged in advocacy efforts in a way that we really haven't been, at least not to this extent before in the Maryland Music Educators Association. And there's work to be done in your choirs as well. Just because we don't traditionally advocate or think about advocacy as part of our typical day-to-day annual approach as choristers, at least in my 27 years, I haven't thought of the necessity of needing to be an active advocate for choral music. Of course, we're seeing that we have to be now, but when there are advocacy efforts to provide funding to nonprofit organizations, payroll protection plan, advocating for arts funding or the National Foundation for the Arts or cuts for the Kennedy Center, big things like that have a trickle-down effect. While it may not say, help us save ACDA or help us save Chorus America, it may not be that blatantly honest, blatantly obvious of what the ask is, but there are definitely steps that we can all take to have our voice be heard and have support and funding and policies in place that better enable the work that we do as leaders in the choral field.
One of the teachers on the webinar I was in, we went through some technical stuff, and she then had a meeting with some of her county school teachers, and they worked out a plan. And that afternoon, she got a note from a superintendent who said, "Look, I just read a report, and it wasn't mine, Michael. It wasn't my May 5th, the webinar. It was, there's so much garbage out there right now. It's just unbelievable." But it said something like, "We've got to have a meeting. I don't know how in the world we're going to have band and orchestra and choir next year." And she wrote back after she said, "Look, listen, we're on this." And then the superintendent came back, or principal or whatever, and said, "Can we have a meeting in the morning?" And then they went to the meeting, and they just reported to me today that they said the moment that those teachers said, "We've got this," or "We're on this," that prompted that person to bring them in and find out what their plan was. And once they heard their plan, they said, "Great. Now, how is that for a simple turnaround of advocacy?" And I think, to me, that's to the young people is saying, look, get a plan, get in there, be at the table, and when that comes up, saying, "I'm on this, I've got this," and you know what? They can't do that unless we have their back, or we got to be with them and let them know, because I feel like I had that person's back on that moment to say, "I'm going to help you do this, so you got a plan you can count on." And I think that's the moment we're in. We're not waiting for some handbook to come out. At this moment, we're saying, "I've got it. I can do it. I'll be there."
When Tim Sharps tells us to be at the table, to say that we're on this, I'm remembering that I was fortunate to be part of the Summer Choral Conducting Institute at Westminster Choir College in Princeton, and back in the day when Weston Noble was part of it. And he talks to all of us, and I know that this message still applies to all of us who are choral conductors at heart, whether we're in a school, at a church, in a house of worship, in a civic group, a community group. He said that the thing about us being choral directors is that we didn't just think the music was pretty. We didn't just cry because one of them was particularly moving. We were those people where music by a choir grabbed us by the heart and made us cry, and we had to be in charge of how that goes. I think that metaphor for why we're all in the field and why we need to be our own advocates in this particular time and in this time going forward is a very important message, that we can help set the table. If somebody tells us that we're super spreaders, we should know that the super spreading, as it comes out from the University of Colorado and the University of Maryland so far, is that even with masks on, we can sing in straight lines, we can sing better outside than inside, and that aerosol spray is not 6 feet, which is our normal social distancing, but 12, maybe 14, and that we should sing for approximately 30 minutes from the first sound. So then we need to leave that space that we're rehearsing in the direction opposite the way we had been singing, straight lines, staggered rows, so that no one's directly behind anyone. So these are the things that we can do to keep singing and to have solutions like that, so that we can move forward. Robin will talk about and is on her more comprehensive videos that we've linked to this Voices United page. She talks about, don't forget the joy. If any of you have tried these virtual choirs and less than half of your group participated, I know that was true in my children's chorus and in my church choir. It's that we don't get to hear each other, and people will talk about how that can be alleviated too, and maybe to do things like maybe use Flipgrid, as what Robin does, and start with a phrase at a time, or just use the voice memo recorder. And whether you use GarageBand or Audacity, deal with the audio first, because it's the perception of hearing other voices that's so important. And we got plenty of the seeing each other, even if it's these microscopic little screens on Zoom or other video conferencing media. So those are some of the things. And then a beauty coming out of this pandemic, and this one comes straight from Thea Kano. I didn't remember to put the clip here. She said, and this was funny and so true, right? How many of you in this region of the United States have to shut everything down because, oh no, snow, we're going to lose a rehearsal? And she says, see you on Zoom. So there are ways to sing through it. And as we do that, I focus primarily with Philip Schultz, who's working with VocalEssence and Singers of This Age, a service project, but also a youth choir project that is part of VocalEssence in Minnesota that the great Philip Brunel is continuing to lead. And what he has is the chart that tells us that the reason we start with the fact that we're community is that if the community knows that we care and that we connect, then the power to create, the power and the safe or brave space to converse and to collaborate also ensues. So listen to not only that, but also the fact that Philip has already created quite the list of things that I hadn't thought of, I don't know about you, of ways that you can, in fact, use video conferencing to advance the musicianship, literacy, and singing of your choir.
So what I'm beginning to put together and to develop is an actual, what I call pedagogical approach to being choir. And this is sequential to me. The first thing that we have to do is that we show that we care. You know, we show up, we laugh together, we cry together, we have fun, we tell stories. We're just there for each other. And once we show up and we know that we care for them and they know that they care for us and we feel that together, then we're able to nurture a place where connection can happen. And as connection is happening, creating can happen as well at the same time. So we're focusing on that social emotional side and that artistic side at the same time. And when that happens, we then have a brave space or a safe space, depending on how you want to use that language, for conversations and for collaborations. And so we are talking about a variety and experimenting with a variety of techniques for rehearsing via platforms like Zoom with the latency issues. The first thing is to realize that you're probably going to accomplish, you know, a quarter to 35% of what you would accomplish in a normal rehearsal. So change your focus on quality interactions over quantity of time, of material. With that lens and that shift, you can create some really beautiful experiences using principles of call and response, principles of helping your singers to exhibit ways of musical knowing. So in addition to singing, they can chant, they can pat or clap, they can snap, they can hum. We don't hear that. They can audiate. We don't hear that, but they're doing that. But when you think of, they can sway, they can step. All of those things, we can see it on the screen. So if I'm teaching a song and I want to check in on everyone, have them clap the rhythm while they're singing, and I can have a sense for assessing where they are in the moment as they're learning that song with me. The echo technique or the call and response is really strong. So accessing particularly music from the oral traditions around this country, from the Black expression, and then from the wider world perspective of musics that can be taught that way, really works well on Zoom also, because I'm now giving a time where we have a time where we can actually focus on oral skills at the same way that we focus on our sight singing and our notated skills. And in my mind, those two should be equal skills anyway in the new choral world, that if I can really help my singers to read music at sight and be proficient there, and also hold in the other hand oral skills where they can hear something, discern it, and produce it back and improvise and harmonize, then I've created a complete musician who can function in any environment. And so that's always been part of my work. And Zoom has made it much easier to focus on the oral skills. So I do a lot of, I'll sing something and ask someone to riff off of what I've done. Either take my riff, repeat it back and add on to it, or listen to my riff as a call and respond to it in your own way. And we call it inviting someone else into the space. So we often do that at the beginning of rehearsals to open the rehearsal, improvised hello song or an improvised welcome song, where there's body percussion or there's movement, and everyone's invited to create their own response as they enter into the room. Zoom is also a great way to kind of explore chords. And I think I did a little of this on the webinar where you can sustain pitches, sustain chords. And so the graduate students who are all music educators, so they're all actively working in schools. And so this is really fascinating to them that it's like you can still rehearse music. It's just your lens is different. So you have them on mute while you're doing stuff rhythmically. You can check in one by one with them, right, to see how they're doing if you want to hear what they're doing. But when you want to work on chords, take the rhythm away and just have them sustain a chord and then breathe and sustain another chord. And so we can use either our screen share or just new, what I call expanded gestural language. We're creating new language that we can use to help them know where to go on the score. So this is hold, breathe, moving to the next chord. Each of us can create our own system for this that works for us.
Lisa, talk about some of the other things that we learned in our conversations about what we can do while on video conference and in this time to keep singing and keep choirs alive.
So it's thinking about putting small groups through Zoom or through whichever application you're going to use so that you're continuing to build connection. One of the things I will be doing with my university chorale and with my leaders in the fall is making sure that there's a sense of mentorship so that when you bring new people into the space that you haven't had the opportunity to quote unquote breathe with, that there's someone that's had that experience. And to make sure that we are welcoming as diverse a population as is possible, that it's important for us to consider that there are lots of people that may not have a way with their faith-based group to be singing or to be represented, or in community choirs. Some of the work that Jacob is doing is that his section leaders are considering small ways that you can actually maybe even sing out of doors, so long as you make that 12-foot space. So I think there are going to be a lot of FM transmitters and microphones and MIDI keyboards out in parking lots as we continue to move forward. But it's really important that we continue to think about listening to the generations. So one of the most important things, I think, as someone that's getting to be an older educator, is that it's important to listen to the folks that are in your classes and in your choirs and people that you know as acquaintances, and getting to know new people, and remembering that ACDA is a foundational way for you to be looking for resources that we'll be sharing toward the end of that. So we saw that Tim Sharp did put out a letter, and we had talked with Tim. He just put out a letter in the last week or so, and we had talked to Tim prior to that about this idea of we need to make sure that we can find a new mindset, skill set, and a new ways to collaborate. I can call a colleague in Hawaii, or I can call online, I can call someone from Kenya and invite them to come and do a warm-up, or to come and teach us a song, or have choirs teach one another songs, so that we're learning music of the world. There are ways for us to do that in many ways. So what I would say is, let's hear from Tim Sharp, and then I think we need to check in and see if we have any questions from our friends, and we can check in with Nellie on that a little bit. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa. I would also say that we know that this conference itself is full of people who have all kinds of technological wizardry and know-how. I created this PowerPoint, and it's PowerPoint, and I embedded videos with a 15-year-old Mac computer with an old version of GarageBand and iMovie as old as the computer. So if it can be done on something like that, we do know that the digital divide is real, and that there are difficulties with people who don't have access to technology or are just not technologically savvy. And we know that there are choirs in Europe as well as in different parts of our country where it is possibly safe to socially distance and meet for a short amount of time outside with masks on to sing in person. There are directors who found parabolic mics so that they can be 6 feet or more away from the windows of their singers and give them that opportunity to sing, like by actually just being in their yard. There are ways to engage people where the technology is and the internet access are in fact the social economic dividers, and we know that that's a stark contrast. But I do know that when Lisa and I started, we started this conversation with the grief of what the blazes are we supposed to do now, and how are we supposed to do choir online, and to have the mindset that Tim Sharp has, that Thea Kano has, that all of our colleagues that we got to talk to today, and all of the countless ones presenting on the hope for how we turn this around. It's about taking that jar and thinking of it as half full and thinking about the opportunity. So without further ado, here is Tim.
I've got 3 strategic imperatives that I'm telling everybody, and it's going to be my lead story for my September editorial. And that is, number 1, you got to have a new mindset. Number 2, that leads to a new skill set. But number 3 is a collaborative team set that I'm talking about. I think you got to create a team now, where in the past you might have been able to get away with being a lone wolf. I think now you need a team. And that's what I would encourage people to think about, is building a team support group for this new environment and not trying to do it alone.
So as you go to the third point, which is to team mindset and collaborative mindset, would you elaborate a little bit both on the vulnerabilities and the possibilities, particularly as we challenge our whole art to be more culturally inclusive and dynamic?
Well, collaboration, whether you talk in a racial way or if you just talk about family, you talk collaboration and you're immediately going to hit tension. And you know, it's like, duh, folks, we know this. The moment you work with one other person, you have to work through some tensions at some point. I mean, it doesn't just go down the road, merrily. Collaboration leads to tension. It does. But the thing about tension is that I've always found so true is that the breakthrough of tension leads to ideas and opportunity. And it's just on the other side of tension where the great ideas come from. And if you avoid the tension, then you're going to miss the idea. And that's the door. You have to go through tension to get to the great ideas. I don't know any way around it, because it almost is inherent in the process that even the new idea is going to rub against an old idea, and change is, people hate it. So moving through that tension and race, you name the difference, it's going to lead to tension. I don't disapprove of the tension myself. I actually, anytime I'm feeling tension, I'm going, wake up. Here's your moment. You know, here's the wake up call. Don't run away from it. Now, how much tension I can have in one day, that's a different problem. But the tension is my wake up call. And so my answer to that, Michael, is don't be afraid of the tension. Don't run away from it. Go headstrong into it, and of course with empathy and with a open mind to learn. And I think we can really make, so to your point about collaboration, really look at your team, red and yellow, black and white. You know, make sure your team is filled with potential tension. You know, potential differences, transgender. You know, put it in there. Because, man, that's going to run some idea up against your conventional wisdom, which will then break through, I think, to a new idea that will be transformative. So that's the only way I think we can get through life right now, is to embrace the tension and work through to the new idea.
So as we go to our closing slide, I won't play it so that there's time for us to take questions. It is true that when we got to meet in person, I've had opportunity and privilege in the last few years to offer a toast at our choral conference. And I thought rather than the words coming from me, to have it come from a singer in VocalEssence Singers of This Age that Philip Schultz directs in Minneapolis, to know that this quote comes from somebody for whom English is a second language, and it comes with the song Peace Through the Hate. That this was a project not only to make a song that they performed on Minnesota Public Radio and is available on YouTube, but also that it became a creating project, that there's beautiful art, and you can see these slides. Also, they'll be put up on our Voices United page. But the quote is music. And it's actually our toast for this year, I think. Music is the hope that after the cold, harsh winter will come the bountiful spring rain that will water the land and bring back nature that was covered under a layer of snow. So the harmonies and melodies will continue to bloom, and music will continue to bring us together in unity, in joy, and with love. So to our choral art and to each of you, cheers, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And Nellie, I do understand there are a few questions, and we have time to take a couple if you'd like to read one for us. And thank you, everyone, so much for coming. And we are happy to help as much as we can. Nellie, go ahead.
Thank you, guys. That was such an awesome presentation. Our first question is from Justine Kuntz. We're all experts at teaching music, but teaching how to use technology has been a hurdle for me. What works to teach singers how to use Zoom, recording, tech, virtual choir techniques, etc.?
I found, Justine, that by going myself on all those YouTube how-tos and finding the one that connects with me the most, because since millions of the people around the world have had to figure it out at the same time and had the same lack of knowledge, there's a lot of how-to videos up. And I found that if I could figure out how to do it from a Zoom video, and then I could create the same kind of recording to help somebody through it. That was the best instructor, so that if I could put it in my own words, you know how they say, if you learn the material, that's one thing, but if you can teach the material, you really know it. So it's that. If you can find a way to internalize all the millions of how-to videos and find the one that works for you, and then make that instruction clear to others.
Well, and no presentation would be complete without Bogart the cat making a screen. I promise I didn't prompt him. He was downstairs crying with his toy. I would also say, make sure that you're looking at Joel's and Parev's presentation tomorrow when they talk about the basics of how do you even get started. I also am going to make a plug because I am going to be trying this new My Choral Coach, which gives you a place where you can, I think it's $25 that you can pay as an ACDA member, and it gives you a place to insert all of your singers. You can put all of your teaching materials, all of your scores in one place, and then everything is housed in one place for you and for your singers. So I would say that's a good way to start, and I do agree that YouTube videos are fantastic ways. That's how I got started with doing all the virtual things that I've been still learning how to do. Nellie, I think we have time for one or two more, depending on the length of the question.
Great. So I think I have two more.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. In what ways have you two been prompted to be there for and support your singers and students as individuals?
Lisa, you first.
You say that. So how have we been asked to be there for our singers, or how have we chosen?
Yeah, in when presented with a student who might have needed more support and assistance during this time, how have you been able to navigate that?
Well, I am fortunate that I work at a state institution where there's lots of help for everything from emotional health to physical health. I know as Mason does plan to do a hybrid opening next, we should have a final vote on that next week, but we are planning to do a hybrid open because we have international students that are here in country that are planning to come to school. It's important, most people in the world that know me have my cell phone. And when I have people in student teaching, or they're an assistant conductor, or they're getting to a dissertation point, there are little codes that I put on my phone so that my husband knows that if my phone goes off in the middle of the night and it says student teacher next to it, I make sure he answers if he gets to the phone first. So I also think, we've used the Band app as a way for students to talk with one another. And I think using tools like Zoom and using our classroom platforms are great ways. And I think we have to watch our boundaries so that we have time to make sure that we take care of ourselves. And I will admit that I've done some of that this summer to kind of recharge. But we've got to remember that if we keep a group of people that are connected, it doesn't always have to be the instructor or the conductor that's a help. And you had one more question?
Yeah, one more, the final one. What do you two consider to be the positives coming out of this?
I think one of the positives that comes out of this is that we no longer think that everything has to happen in the choir room, that we can find ways to teach things asynchronously, that we can be more purposeful and mindful and deliberate about delivering theory instruction or appreciation or context. One of the things that we were talking about, Thea Kano and Lisa and I, was if we can't replace the concept of a live performance, you can maybe have the watch party, but more importantly, you can just lean into the fact that you're on this medium and people can chat while the performance is going of the piece that you have, and you've dealt with whatever the licensing that you've needed to license. And then you can use the chat to be that forum of having a complete conversation. J.J. Norman, one of the things that he talked about was actually using this as an opportunity to literally be part of the music making process. So he's commissioned a composer. He's the president of the Alexandria Choral Society, and a composer is now crowdsourcing a 7-movement work, the poetry, the verses, the musical setting, the texture. It's all on Zoom calls. And so the collaboration in the creative process is much more complete. Some of you have done that with guests coming to your Zoom calls since you hadn't, or maybe I'll speak for myself, I hadn't figured out how to rehearse on Zoom. So I used it for enrichment to have guests come on and talk about their careers in the arts and how choir kind of headed them in that direction.
Well, and I think having the ability to look at recordings and take that as a part of what we're doing with our ensembles is that we're listening to a wide swath of music, that we're researching, presenting as wide a cadre as we can, looking at early music and looking at our heritage and looking at our American heritage. So I know, Michael, you had a final slide that you wanted to put up. We'd really like to encourage you to look at these interviews as you have time. And I'll go hop onto Facebook for a few minutes. So if there's anyone that has further questions that we didn't get an opportunity to do that, I'm happy to see you there. And we want to thank you so much for coming. Please make sure you're looking for the next year. All of these presentations will be available for you through our YouTube channel. And please don't be afraid to reach out. And we all have high days and low days. And it doesn't have to be the high day that you reach out, because we're here. We're not going anywhere, right, Dr. Wu? We're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere, right?
All these links that are on these last 2 slides will also be both in the chat and in our Voices United YouTube pages. So make sure that you come back and see it and just scroll to the end so you don't have to watch me fumble with slides. But mostly, thank you very much for your contributions to our choral art. And let's hashtag keep singing through the storm, a hashtag that was brought by Angela Johnson, who is the artistic director of the Young Naperville Singers. But keep singing through the storm. Thank you, everyone.
And for those of you that are watching us as a recording, if you want to say hello or give us a thumbs up, and make sure that you're joining our channel so that ACDA can continue to grow. Nellie, I am so proud of you as a student leader of our ACDA chapter. She's our outgoing president. And I look forward to watching you grow as you continue in the generations behind Michael and myself to keep everyone singing.
Absolutely.
May
Thank you.
everyone be safe, and thank you to Max Nolan and to Pam McDermott and to the committee for all of your work. And let's hope that next year we can be toasting